Night one of the NFL draft is in the books. What a great first round it was. Thank you everybody who joined for just a remarkable live stream. The super chats, the interactions, the laughs. It was such a great night. I'm already excited for tomorrow night. I will see all of you again for my round 2 reactions. Tonight, we are going to be kind of recapping my thoughts on every first round pick. I will be giving some initial grades here. Some of these grades will be a little bit more like preliminary because some of these picks, we need to see the whole plan come through, right? You made a pick here, but you still have a gaping need there, and let's see what they can do on day 2. So sometimes these grades change when I do my final grades at the end of the entire draft. Make sure you guys are subscribed for those when we do roll around for that. But tonight is all about reacting to what we saw on the first night and my thoughts for every single pick. So let's go ahead and get into it with the number 1 pick, Cam Ward. What do you say about the pick that we've been anticipating for 3 months at this point? I will give this one an A. I think it's excellent process by the Titans, especially seeing these quarterbacks fall. Shedeur Sanders, like very clearly there was one QB in this draft worthy of taking inside the top 10. They stay put. They take their guy, a quarterback with legitimate kind of Pro Bowl franchise QB potential, whichever way you want to put it. I think this was really the only choice for the Tennessee Titans, and hard to give them anything other than an A. This isn't going to be my highest grade of an S for certified steal or anything like that. We'll have a few of those throughout today's video, but great process. I'm excited to see what it's going to look like for the Titans, and on top of that, they're setting up pretty nicely to maybe get him one of these top playmakers at the top of the second round. Look for Jaden Higgins or Burden would be really fun to pair up and give him a lot to work with there. But then the surprise of the entire draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars essentially trade 3 first-round picks, their own second this year, which was the 36th pick in the draft, obviously pick 5, and then their number 1 next year to come up for the two-way Travis Hunter. I'm going to give this an A grade as well. I think it's perfectly reasonable process for the Jags because you could say, wow, you're giving up 3 number 1s? Well, what if Travis Hunter is a player that ends up being a player worth a top 3 pick as a wide receiver and a top 3 pick as a corner for you? Yeah, that's worth a second and 2 1s to go get that player. Yes, you're trading up for 1 player, but that 1 player plays 2 positions. So it's a very obviously unique conversation in terms of debating the value of a trade up, which is a huge risk for teams trading up, especially for a non-quarterback, because the player has to be worth 2 or 3 starters in that situation. But obviously, the Travis Hunter two-way debate makes that a very unique conversation. But yeah, Travis Hunter did end up my number 1 corner with some of those concerns on Will Johnson, who falls to day 2 of the draft, and he ended up my number 2 wide receiver behind Tet McMillan. But what a way for Jacksonville with Liam Cohen coming in to make a statement. I love the move. I love the aggressiveness. He's going to really give you everything you need for Trevor Lawrence in that offense. Him and Brian Thomas are going to be electric together. And to plug him into that secondary, I can get behind a secondary now with Tyson Campbell, Travis Hunter, and now Jordan Lewis in the slot. Huge missing piece for the defense. So, I mean, to fill 2 needs with the trade up, it's really a spectacular move. Round of applause for James Gladstone for the young GM to come in and make a splash like that. Holy crap. And then I'm going to talk about this from Cleveland's perspective as well once we get down to pick number 5, because I actually like it for them too. But a pair of A grades out the gate. I can't give that one a certified steal as much as I like the move because they did have to pay a damn pretty penny to go make it happen. But again, an A grade is essentially, I have nothing wrong to say about the pick. We're just reserving the S grades for, like, again, certified steal to highlight to me what the maybe 4 or 5 best values of the first night of the draft were. So again, sticking with the A grade on the Giants, taking Abdul Carter. Love the move. Another move that we've been anticipating now for at least 3 or 4 weeks since Russ signed with the Giants. He was, the best player available at this point, so hard to really argue with it. I'm curious to see what ends up happening with Kayvon Thibodeau. Is he cool with kind of playing a rotational backup role, or is he going to kind of give him a call tonight, tomorrow morning, say, hey, can you trade me, send me somewhere I'm going to start because it's a big year for me? I wouldn't blame Kayvon for that, but I don't blame the Giants for taking Abdul either. I mean, him plus Brian Burns plus Dexter Lawrence to get, I mean, let me put it this way. The combination of Abdul Carter and Brian Burns has a chance within the next 2 years to be the best edge rush duo in the league if Abdul Carter hits his ceiling quickly. You pair that with Dexter Lawrence, who might be the best defensive player in the league right now. That is how you have an elite identity that can hopefully get this Giants defense up to the status that they've been trying to get it to for a long, long time. So hard to argue with it, going A there. But with the Will Campbell pick, with the number 4 pick, this is where I do have some criticisms. I'm going to give this one a C, which is essentially me saying the pick is fine. I don't hate it, but I certainly would have gone in a different direction, and I think there were better players at the position they drafted. That's less of a nitpick for me. I think Will Campbell's really good. He was inside my top 10, so it's not like this was some crazy reach, but I do think if you're drafting for a left tackle, I understand they might have some holdups because Armond Membou hasn't played over on the left side of the offensive line really ever. So they may have, I understand it, right? Like you can justify saying, well, we just don't want Drake May getting killed next year. And Will Campbell's a super high floor left tackle, maybe doesn't have the crazy upside, but we don't really want to mess around with Armond Membou having to learn the left side. And maybe Membou is a little bit, further behind Campbell in terms of development. I can at least get behind that. But I do ultimately think Membou has the more projectable franchise left tackle potential in terms of play strength and length. I've talked about this, but with Will Campbell, it's not that his tape was bad, but a lot of people kind of said, oh, don't worry about the length. He has great tape, and his tape is really good, but you do see the length actually legitimately impact his game, and you can certainly argue that Armond Membou was much more locked down in pass protection than Will Campbell was against the same SEC caliber schedule. So I'm critical for that reason, but honestly, the main reason I have holdups on this pick, the Patriots have had a rough go at it in terms of making the right call at wide receiver. Last year, Pats fans were upset when I criticized them for trading down when they should have taken Ladd McConkey, and I slammed them for making Jalen Polk their guy. We saw how that played out. This year, I have a very strong inclination that they are going to regret not taking T-Mac Tet McMillan, who to me was a top 4 player in this draft. He goes 4 picks later to the Panthers. For me, I think Campbell's going to be a fine left tackle, and if he can lower his stance and learn how to play guard, could be more of a Pro Bowl guard over time. I think his upside at left tackle is something like a Bernard Raymond or maybe even a Zach Tom, a good tackle, maybe not a great tackle. I think T-Mac has top 5 to 10 potential at wide receiver, right? I really, really do. So I'm going to kind of call my shot on that one. And I know there's a lot of Pats fans that are in the same boat there. So I went with a C on this one. It's not going to be the end of the world. They're going to be able to protect Drake May's blind side. And if they can make a move to go get Jaden Higgins or Luther Burden, that could be one of those grades that comes up to more of like a B. But as we saw last year, they had the receiver sitting in their lap and they screwed it up. So we'll see how that one goes. All right, the number 5 pick, we got to have a big conversation about Cleveland, who moves down from number 2, passing up on Travis Hunter. And they load up, obviously, on an early second tomorrow, where they're going to have some exciting options on the table, potentially even Shedeur Sanders. And then they get a first-round pick in next year's draft class from the Jags, which this is something I didn't say on the Jags pick, but when you make that move, essentially to make that worth it, you got to start winning some football games. Because if you end up giving another top 5 pick in a potentially great quarterback class to the Browns, then the Browns will have won that trade. So to get that pick from the Jags next year is a big deal. And that's kind of why I would be a little surprised if they took Shedeur tomorrow, because it's almost like, man, they're loading up in a QB class that they think could be special next year. So we'll obviously see how that all plays out. But I kind of think this is a mutually beneficial deal. I think for Cleveland, you know, the long-term potential for Travis Hunter to play, you know, both corner and wide receiver was there, but this was something we talked about in the mock drafts, was like, well, they don't really have room for him immediately at cornerback. And if that was going to be something, you know, if they can get this crazy value where the Jags are willing to pay up to treat him as a two-way player, and Cleveland's more like, well, at least for now, you're going to be a wide receiver. And then if we eventually move on from Martin Emerson or Greg Newsome, then you can play corner for us. You know, it does make sense for me for Cleveland to make Travis Hunter happy, let him go to a spot that's going to let him thrive as a two-way player and embrace that mentality, and then get all this immense value, come down to the 5th pick where you can still get Mason Graham, who's, I mean, all the talk about him falling in this draft was all about, can he be a Batman? Can he be a true alpha number one? Does he have the physical traits to be that elite takeover DT? No, probably not. But can he be one of the best Robins in the league to Myles Garrett? Absolutely. And the stunts that Jim Schwartz is going to draw up with Mason Graham and Myles Garrett with their athleticism, that alone is going to be an absolute handful. But I really like the pick of Mason Graham. I think that D-line really needed it. And if you're looking to build through the trenches instead of, you know, skill player, also makes sense to lean that way away from Travis Hunter. So I think everything from Cleveland's perspective, I very quickly got sold on this. You know, we got so sucked into Travis Hunter being a Cleveland Brown that it took a minute to kind of process. But I actually think it's a perfectly good move for Cleveland. The pick itself, going Mason Graham, totally works for me. I think the value's just fine. So I'm going to go A on Cleveland with the 5th pick. And then the Raiders, going Ashton, Jeanty. I mean, again, we've been mocking this for a long, long time. I'm going to go A here. Totally fits the mentality with Pete Carroll and kind of, you know, bring that physical mentality to the table. They want to make playing defense against them suck. They did that last year when they took Brock Bowers, already one of the best run-after-catch weapons in the league. Now you have another guy that's going to suck to tackle in Ashton Jeanty. If they can bring Luther Burden in here tomorrow, this could model those peak San Francisco 49ers Yak Bros offenses. You might have 3 of the 10 best tackle-breaking skill players in the league, frankly. That would be a ton of fun. But even without Luther Burden, Jeanty and Brock Bowers gives them a complete identity for their offense. And I think the offensive line is good enough that you can justify taking a running back as well. We'll see what DJ Glaze ends up being at right tackle. But if you're going to take a running back this early, you better make sure you've got the blocking infrastructure for him so you're not creating a Saquon Barkley Giants situation. I don't think it's that bad with the Raiders. I don't. And then for the Jets, trying to establish their own dominant offensive line. This was one of the chalkiest picks. We've been mocking this for a long time. This is another A grade for me. Really is just the perfect way to kickstart a build. Not even a rebuild with the Jets. I think they have a lot of talent. They're going to need a quarterback at some point. Sorry, Justin Fields truthers. He's more of a placeholder, I think, but we don't need to get into that right now. But for Aaron Glenn, who saw what that offensive line did in Detroit, he looks at his offensive line with the Jets, and they have one missing hole at right tackle, Armond Membou. You now have cornerstone tackle duo with Olu-Fashanu last year. You've got interior pieces. I think it's going to be one of the better offensive lines in the league. So that makes a ton of sense. And it creates a very fun narrative down the road because we will be able to compare this AFC East tackle, these 2 tackle picks out of the AFC East. Do the Patriots end up regretting Will Campbell? Does Membou end up being the better player? We will find out in like 3 years. This one right here, pick number 8, maybe my favorite pick of the entire first round. The Carolina Panthers. Carolina takes T-Mac McMillan. Oh, this just made me so happy in the live stream. You can hear my voice is getting raspy. It's probably because I was so stoked when this pick happened. So you guys know I lived in Charlotte last year. Very much a adopted Panthers fan here on this channel. And I was kind of scared of all the Jalen Walker stuff. I just think he was too risky to take inside the top 10 when there was the potential for someone like Tet McMillan to be there. And for them to basically play the board and say, we love Jalen Walker, but T-Mac is too good to pass up here. I couldn't agree more. I had 4 blue chip players in this draft class: Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Ashton Jeanty, and T-Mac, Tet McMillan. I'm glowing about this. The draft strategy, like I said, to not lock in on taking Jalen Walker. I think to give Bryce a true opportunity to succeed with quite possibly like a top 10 offensive infrastructure, how quickly that has changed from his rookie season. He's got the offensive line. He's got a run game. He's got a coach that we really believe in now. And talk about a missing piece for this group of wide receivers. You get a true X wide receiver in T-Mac for the coach who got to work with Mike Evans a couple years ago in Tampa Bay in Coach Canales. And then what I love about this too is it doesn't just help Bryce, it helps your number 1 pick from last year. Xavier Legette doesn't have to be something he isn't, right? Xavier Legette is going to be at his best as a true deep threat, not drawing number 1 corners, as a Z flanking receiver. T-Mac is your X. And then you have Adam Thielen gets benefited from this too. He gets to play his natural role as a slot wide receiver. This wide receiving core screams to me. What a fun group. So excited for T-Mac. And with that, I want to shout out the sponsor for today's video, Underdog Fantasy. So right now you can do best ball drafts for this upcoming NFL season, which is a ton of fun. It's just like any normal fantasy league, except you don't have to set your lineups. So if you want to do a draft here in April, it's all set it and forget it. It's just going to come back to what was your knowledge at the time as a draft junkie going up against other competition that maybe aren't so dialed into the draft. You can hop in and join best ball leagues now, and they have season-long pick'em. So if you think T-Mac and Bryce Young are going to go higher than the season stats that they set for these guys, if you think this duo, the sky's the limit, and it's a group you want to get behind, whether that is through the best ball draft or through season-long pick'ems, now is as good of a time to find value before those numbers change and their draft positions change. Now is a great time to get signed up at Underdog. You can play pick'em for baseball, basketball playoffs, NHL, all that good stuff. And on top of all that, you can support my channel in the process. That is going to be code TFG at Underdog Fantasy. They will give you a bonus match on top of all of that. That's code TFG at Underdog. And thank you to Underdog for just being a great partner, re-upping with me for this upcoming NFL season. Shout out, very good people to work with over there at Underdog as well. But let's keep going. The number 9 pick, the New Orleans Saints, did the right thing. I was sitting there holding my breath saying, man, I don't want to be the guy that comes out and gives a team an F grade. But if they came out and started this rebuild, just taking Shedeur or Jackson Dart, I would have slammed them for it. This team is not ready to draft a quarterback, even if Derek Carr might not be ready to play next year. This makes me feel so much better about the New Orleans Saints. And even beyond the quarterback thing, all of the Mykel Williams stuff really didn't line up for me either, because I think he's a horrible system for Brandon Staley's 3-4 defense. So that scared me too. I think this was the best pick they could have made if they were going to stick and pick at 9. He will probably play left guard right now, and then he gives you a great option to maybe be a right tackle with Trevor Penning, assuming he doesn't develop, but hey, maybe Trevor Penning does. He is athletic and got better as a run blocker last year. So Banks, who ended up the number 10 player on my final big board, ends up going here at number 9. I love building through the trenches. Kellen Moore is not making any mistake about where he came from. He had those great O-lines in Dallas, and then, of course, what he had in Philly last year. This is, to me, the perfect pick for them at number 9, and I'm glad that they went that route over some of their other options. Then the Bears at number 10, making Colston Loveland the first tight end off the board. Wasn't a huge surprise to me. I was talking about this on the live stream. It was a take that I thought of in the car, and I was like, I got to have this tweet when I get home. And then unfortunately, I forgot about it. But the thought was, man, Colston Loveland's kind of a lot like Sam Laporta as a prospect. Still needs to get better as a blocker, but the technique is good. I think even Loveland has more frame to fill out than Sam Laporta, but their ability to separate, their ball skills, very similar. And of course, I'm bringing that up because Ben Johnson has come over here to Chicago, and I think getting more juice out of that tight end position, this makes total sense because we saw this in Detroit. Even like TJ Hawkinson wasn't athletic enough for Ben Johnson to want to invest in. They traded away Hawkinson and for all intents and purposes used that capital to go get Sam Laporta, who's a little faster. And that made sense to me why they would like Loveland over even Tyler Warren, because how this offense is designed is having very easy outlets from that tight end and tapping into that speed to pull away from linebackers and safeties trying to cover them. And I think Loveland definitely has that speed element over someone like Tyler Warren, who goes a few picks later. So I do understand it. Loveland did end up the 22nd player on my board. So, and by the way, we went A for the Saints with the 9th pick. Anyway, I do understand it for the Bears. I'm not going to go A. I think it's a little bit early for a player, in my opinion, that was inconsistent in contested catch situations last year. Granted, was playing through a shoulder injury, so you're hoping that gets better, but it is a bit of a projection. And you're hoping, the blocking can come along. He can fill out a little bit more. I don't know that he's the level of tight end prospect, in my opinion, that you would typically draft with a top 10 pick. That's really my only criticism of it, though. I think the scheme fit is great. I love kind of getting more juice from that tight end spot. This was kind of a win for me because I've gone at it with Bears fans saying, like, look, Cole Kmet's fine, but, like, you could easily upgrade it over him at any given moment. And they chose to do that here. So I think that's just going to provide a lot more flexibility and juice out of that tight end position. So I went B with this one. It's a good pick. Again, B's a good grade. Don't make any mistakes about that. But then we have the Niners taking Mykel Williams at pick 11. I get it. I think it's a fine pick. I'm going to go B- on this one. It's a little earlier than I would have been willing to roll the dice on Mykel Williams myself. Mykel was down there at 29 on my big board, so definitely in reach territory based on my evaluation here, and that's what we're grading off here is my evaluation. But I don't think it's a horrible pick because if you really wanted to go edge and you're terrified of the off-field concerns on James Pierce Jr. and Mike Green, obviously the league is terrified of the Mike Green off-field concerns, I think Mykel Williams is the safer option compared to some of the other edges that went a few picks later, Jalen Walker and Shemar Stewart, who are much bigger dice rolls. Look, Mykel Williams is a heavy-handed edge who is going to help the Niners get to third downs, let Nick Bosa do his thing. And he does still have potential, right? Like, he played in this weird system at Georgia that didn't really let him pin his ears back. I think playing on that ankle injury, it just muddies things up to know just how athletic he is. We didn't really get, I think, full speed testing numbers from Mykel Williams either. So there's maybe even some more hidden upside in there for him to be more of a difference-making player. So gambling on that is fun to think about. But realistically, I think he gives you a really nice number 2 opposite of Bosa, someone that's going to stop the run, like I said, help you get to third downs. And I think he can develop into someone that can win one-on-one reps as a rusher. At least he, unlike someone like Shemar Stewart, tried stuff. I saw him break out inside swipe counters. I saw him try a fake spin against Texas. Like, I'm excited to see him go to a system that's going to let him do what he does best. Put his hand in the dirt, rush wide 9 occasionally, but play 5-tech as well, even slide inside at times and rush as a 3-tech, but go get after the quarterback. A lot of parallels to, like, Trayvon Walker coming out just in terms of the role and how Georgia just doesn't really let these guys thrive. So It's earlier than I would prefer, but I still don't think it's a bad pick. I gave it a B- grade for the Niners at pick 11. The main other criticism is like, I wonder if letting the Cardinals get Walter Nolen instead is something they will look back on and maybe regret. I think Walter Nolen has a lot more upside to pay back the 11th pick in the draft than someone like Mykel Williams. But who knows? Maybe some of that stuff we talked about leads to Mykel being better than I'm even projecting. So I don't hate it. B-. Let's go to the 12th pick for the Cowboys. This is the definition of a B pick to me. I think a lot of people freaked out when Tyler Booker came off the board. This is something I've talked about with Booker. Like, I think he's a really good player. He ended up 26th on my big board there. So certainly like a little bit earlier than you'd prefer. But I think what we saw happen was so many people, rightfully so, were talking about how, oh, well, if you're a wide zone team, Tyler Booker's a 4th round talent. That's very true, but that doesn't mean for a team like Dallas, or I put him to Cincinnati in my latest mock draft at 17, like that doesn't mean he can't be a really good guard, incredibly high floor, smart player who's going to keep Dak Prescott upright after Zach Martin retired. I think they might have locked themselves into going offensive line, just knowing that's when the Cowboys are at their best is when Dak has time to throw. Those top 3 tackles went, and they probably felt pretty solid about Tyler Booker coming in as just a good starting guard. So I can't, praise the roof out of this and give it an A or anything, but it's a good, solid B pick, in my opinion. Then the Dolphins go Kenneth Grant. I'm going to give this one a B+. I think it's a really nice pick. It, again, is, sure, a little earlier than I'd prefer, but we are getting into that range now where, like, players 16 all the way down to, like, Higgins at 31. In this draft, you start to kind of cluster these guys all together once you get past these top prospects. Now, they did elect to go with him over Walter Nolen, of course, which that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Like, I think Nolen was a better prospect than both Mykel and Kenneth Grant. But I'm still going a B+ for Miami because good on them for actually going with physicality, going with trench play. Don't let teams run all over you. Like, you got enough speed on this team. You got enough finesse. Let's get some real beef in the building and get to January and be able to play cold weather football. So you bring in a guy that played at Michigan. Great call. You get a true nose tackle to put next to Zach Sealer as well. That's perhaps why they went with him over Walter Nolen, because they wanted that true nose tackle. So I do totally get it. The only thing with Kenneth Grant is, like, they're going to have to coach some grit and some toughness into him. He flashes it. And yes, we praised him for playing at Michigan and being a Big Ten guy and maybe giving you that, physical mentality, but he didn't always show it. It just ran hot and cold. When they played Ohio State and they needed big stops, he would dig deep and two gap and take on double teams. Throughout the course of his final season, though, after winning a ring at Michigan, it did kind of feel like maybe he was checked out a little bit. Can't even fully blame him for that, but he's a big 335-pound nose tackle that moves really well, that doesn't always want to play like a 335-pound nose tackle. There's a lot of times where he resorts to finesse rushing and trying to split gaps instead of defending the run with discipline. So there's still some coaching and consistency to get out of him. That's why he was lower on my board. But I really like the fit. Again, going B+. All right, Tyler Warren to the Colts at 14. This one's an S, a certified steal. Love the fit. And obviously we have mocked this time and time again. If Warren were to fall to you, he was going to be the pick for the Colts. I think I had this in my mock draft a couple days ago. But this just, and not only is it a great value and a top 10 player on my board and all that here at 14, but he just makes this Colts team so difficult to defend. If Richardson can stay healthy, this is an offense with Shane Steichen. They want to be maybe the team in the league that runs the most RPOs in the league because they have the threat of the run with Richardson. You have Jonathan Taylor, and especially now with Tyler Warren, who's going to come into the league as one of the best run after catch threats in the league, him leaking out on a pop pass where edge rushers and linebackers have to not just worry about Anthony Richardson keeping it, but maybe he keeps it and he's got a second option to flip it out to Tyler Warren. That's going to be annoying. But you also can, with play action, all the play action they want, he's going to leak behind linebackers and just get lost quickly. Just from a scheme fit, it's just so fun with Tyler Warren there. There's room for him to develop as a blocker, as a route runner. He's not a perfect prospect, but man, he's a ton of fun. Just kind of passes the eye test too. It's going to look really good playing for the Colts there. I wonder if he'll keep the number 44 and keep the Dallas Clark vibes going. But the Falcons were busy tonight to get edge rush. They start with Jalen Walker at pick 15. So I'm lower on Walker, but like I said, once we get into this range, players 15 down to like 30, they're all kind of lumped together for the most part. It's a fun fit. I think schematically speaking, a 3-4 system is where Jalen Walker had to go to come in and play that stand-up edge rusher. Getting to stay home at Georgia, a lot of stuff to like here. I think this is about as early as I would have started thinking about Jalen Walker. He does have a lot of upside, but a lot of downside. He's got short arms. He played a lot of linebacker at Georgia, and his linebacker tape wasn't good. That's why the Micah Parsons, Jalen Walker comps, it's not a range I'm willing to go with because, look, Micah Parsons' linebacker tape was really good. Not so much with Jalen Walker. He showed his best stuff as a pass rusher. But I think especially after getting James Pierce later in the draft, it opens up even more opportunity for Jalen Walker, at least in year one, to just really line up everywhere, be a rush linebacker on third downs. I'm very excited to see how Raheem Morris plans on using him. I'm going to give this one a B as a grade. I think it was a fine, solid pick. Personally, I would have rather seen them take this next player at 15 and then make that trade up to get the edge in James Pierce later. But I'm not going to slam them for it. They have missed so much at edge over the years that I almost don't mind them saying, let's take a first-round double dip strategy, because they've spent all these second, third-round picks on this motley crew of pass rushers. It's hard to hit on pass rushers in the second and third round of the draft. So get two swings at it. We're almost kind of packaging this with the James Pierce discussion at 27, but we will revisit that when we get there. You get the point where you're going to go with a B on Jalen Walker, and that probably would have been more of like a C+ if we saw Mike Green go 3 picks later, because I think Mike Green would be a much better player as that 3-4 outside backer for them. But clearly there is a lot to those sexual assault allegations from years ago for Mike Green, with him dropping to the second round. So I'm willing to give him a little bit more grace not taking Mike Green there. Then we got the Cardinals at pick 16. We've been alluding to this, but I love this pick for Walter Nolen, especially with, some of these other D linemen going ahead. It's somewhere between an A and an S, like an A+ maybe. Walter Nolen ended up the 9th player on my board. Very good value to get him there. I guess if the Colts getting the 8th player at 14, getting the 9th player at 16, and a great fit, we'll go certified steal for the Cardinals. Maybe the lower end of certified steals that we're going to give grades to tonight. But I just love the landing spot. You get to you get to coach him up with Calais Campbell, who's basically an on-field coach. But he's just super talented. Wins with power. Wins with that rip move. Plenty of room to develop more of a pass rushing repertoire. Would love to see that happen in time in Arizona. What really gets me excited about this, though, is Arizona now immediately has the most improved position group in the entire NFL heading into next year. Last year, B.J. Ojulari, Robinson, the 2 D tackles they signed, not only were those guys not great to begin with, or you were being hopeful to begin with, but they all got hurt. They were down to like practice squad talent by week 4 across the board. So you get those guys back. You also traded for Barron Browning, who got on the field late last year, so you get a full year of Barron Browning, who they brought back. You obviously signed Josh Sweat and Calais Campbell and oh my gosh, it's going to drive me crazy. Just as I'm looking it up here, Dalvin Tomlinson. You've added so much to that group, and now Walter Nolen. You have like 2 hockey lines of defensive lines, both of which are better than whatever line you were trotting out last year. Gannon's a guy that's talked about wanting deep rotations coming from what they had in Philly. So I think he's going to play and make an impact right away. And then the upside for him to be like a legitimate kind of like, I think of like Jeffrey Simmons, Quinnen Williams, like a player of that magnitude. I think that potential is there for Walter Nolen if he really works at his craft. The physical tools are really, really special. So I'm going to go S there. Then for the Bengals at pick 17, this is a tough one because I understand what they're thinking, and even by my own board, I can't be overly critical of this because I have Shemar Stewart at 25. They take him at 17. Again, you don't want Mike Green. You don't want James Pierce. You got burned by Jermaine Burton last year, taking an off-field red flag guy. So who else were they going to go with, right? Like, I guess you could argue for Ezaraku, but I actually have Shemar Stewart ranked higher on my own board because of the theoretical upside that's in there. He's just ultimately not a player I believe in. I just don't think he's good at football. I watched the tape and it's extremely frustrating. But Jesus, man, that bull rush is special. It really is special. I think he hits that bull rush more consistently than Myles Murphy did coming out. But that is unfortunately my low-end comp on Shemar Stewart is Myles Murphy. So it's like dangerous to think about them going back to a similar type of prospect. But they really haven't gotten anything from Murphy. So it's hard to blame them for moving off of that. And then who knows with the Trey Hendrickson situation, maybe they still believe in Murphy and they want to move Hendrickson. I don't know. Ultimately, I'm going to give this one a B- because I don't think the process is horrible. And I don't even think it's this egregious reach. But in my heart of hearts, do I believe that this is the player that is going to start having Cincinnati get back to business with their defense? No. And there are other players that I think could have helped them more. Maybe a Derek Harmon, for example. Gray Zabel goes with the next pick. You could have fixed that left guard spot that is a train wreck right now. So again, not the worst pick in the world. I understand the process, and there is still upside with this pick if you trust your coaching. I just don't know, man. I just don't know. So B- there for the Bengals. But then the Seahawks getting Gray Zabel. I'm going certified steal on this one, not because necessarily the value. I know we say certified steal, but that's also meant to indicate what are my favorite picks within the certain round or whatever. This is absolutely one of my favorite picks. Not only do you fill what was possibly the biggest need any individual team had heading into the draft, which is the Seahawks guard spot, but you fill it with a damn good player. And even above all, what a good feeling for Seahawks fans to see your GM, John Schneider, kind of grow up in front of your own eyes and do something we thought he would never do, and that is take an interior offensive lineman. He's been open about discussing that they don't value it all that much. This was always going to be the right pick for the Seahawks, but I think so many of us, maybe even especially Seahawks fans, just didn't think they would do it. It's like Han Solo and Ben Solo standing on the bridge, and every single time, Ben Solo pulls the trigger and kills his dad. This was the one time, the one scenario where he just gives him a hug and says, let's do the right thing here. I know what I have to do. I don't know if I have the power to do it. And John Schneider did it. So for that reason, I'm going S. I love, love, love everything about that. Not to mention, amazing athlete. This was going to be one of those teams that was not going to be able to consider a Tyler Booker. This is going to be a wide zone blocking system. You need an athlete. You need athletes on the inside. And Gray Zabel gives you just that. Amazing reach blocker at North Dakota State, who had one of the best Senior Bowls I've ever seen in my life. Full stop. I know it's dramatic, but I'm serious. amazing week at the Senior Bowl. All right, the Bucs take Emeka Egbuka at pick 19. So the value's fine. The scheme fits great. I see exactly how he fits with what they want to do, but kind of I don't even want to call it a head scratcher, just kind of like a, okay, because they brought Chris Godwin back. They have McMillan, who they like. Both guys are very similar to Egbuka in that they are best from the slot in a straight line and their system and can play a little bit outside. But now you kind of got three of these guys. So it's like, yeah, you got a type. He's a good player. He was the 24th player on my board. You take him at 19. But like, I don't know. If I'm a Bucs fan, and I think that's the best way to kind of look at these grades, I'm pretty underwhelmed by that. You know, you could have gone defensive line with like a Derek Harmon. You could have gone with a cornerback. You could have taken the chalky pick of Jahdae Campbell. I understand there's some injury concerns there. You could have taken a Malachi Starks, which would just be an absurd fit into that secondary. I mean, I don't really know how to grade that, right? Like, I think eventually he's going to be good, and I praise teams all the time for you don't always draft for immediate need. But at the same time, I kind of feel like the Bucs are setting up really nicely to make a run this year, and taking a wide receiver 3.5 for the year. I don't know. I don't really know how to grade that. It's that those are my thoughts. Whatever the grade is after that is the grade. I think I'll go B- because again, I think he's eventually going to be a good player for them. But it's one of those picks where I just was kind of scratching my head like, okay, it's an interesting choice. But clearly they fell in love with the player. And then we got the Broncos up at pick 20. They take Jahdae Barron. And this was a fun pick because Barron's a player I'm lower on. I've been lower on. I think he ended up 48th on my big board. Yeah, and that was because I think he's a true slot player. And personally, I just, the league places a lower value on slots. The top slot corners in the game get paid about 10, 11, 12 million every free agency period. Some of the game's best slot corners hit the market and are available. And typically, these guys get drafted in the second round. I also didn't think Jahdae Barron was as good as Brian Branch in terms of stickiness in coverage. But he's still a really nice player. And I like the fit in Denver as that slot player. I think being able to fill the run over another McMillan, Jaquan McMillan, right? Their slot corner, their undrafted player who's got good ball skills. He makes plays happen. But he doesn't have the size to fill the run. He doesn't have the tackling consistency to fill the run. Jahdae Barron's going to be an immediate upgrade there. And hell, if anything happens to Talanoa Hufanga, who has a crazy injury record, I think Jahdae Barron could go in and play safety immediately, as he's done at Texas. So I think putting him in there is a really fun fit. And even if Riley Moss gets hurt, Jahdae Barron can step outside. So he just is a nice flex piece to raise the floor of that secondary. It felt like, one more piece in that unit could go a long way, and they fill that. So it's earlier than I would like to take Barron. I raise the question, why not a Marion Hampton? Why not Matthew Golden? I think there were better players at even more valuable positions than slot corner that could have been had for them. So I'm going to give this pick a C+. Not that I think he'll be a bad player. I want to emphasize that. I think it's going to be interesting to look, especially I think at these next three picks. I would peg this as if my best prediction of this is 3 years down the road, we're looking back on this and saying, yeah, I mean, Jahdae Barron's a really good slot corner. He's a nice player for Denver. They're not shooting themselves in the foot. They're not hurting themselves with this pick. But man, Derek Harmon's like a stud D tackle for the Steelers. Marion Hampton's one of the best running backs in the league, and they could have used him at the time. And Matthew Golden is, in my opinion, one of the best picks of this draft and a potential superstar for the Packers. Those are three picks right after Barron went that made me question the pick a little bit. So I'm going C+ on the Broncos. Then we got the Pittsburgh Steelers at 21, not taking Shedeur Sanders. A little bit of a lesson for quarterbacks. Treat the draft process with respect. Teams could not handle the way that Shedeur carried himself throughout this draft process, and he's paying a penny and a half for it here. The Steelers going with the defensive tackle here, someone we've mocked to them plenty of times. He absolutely is their type. They love these athletic 3-down, taller, kind of hybrid 3-techs that could, go out wide and play 5-tech if you want. That's exactly what he can be. I mean, they're going to be able to line up in a 5-1 front now if they want. This is terrifying, man. You can line up in a 5-man front, get after the quarterback with Highsmith. You got Cam Hayward still doing it, but eventually this is a huge pick to replace Cam Hayward, who's very similar physically speaking. Obviously, Keanu Benton, Derek Harmon, and TJ Watt. Yep, have fun. Have fun blocking that group up. Excellent pick. He can basically come in and play Larry Ogunjobi's role from last year, but give you hopefully even more in both phases. But then the Chargers. Oh, by the way, I'm going A for the Pittsburgh Steelers, taking Derek Harmon, a really good pick. Then the Chargers take Omarion Hampton at 22. Very similar to me to the Emeka Egbuka conversation, where, all right, well, obviously makes a ton of sense. Like, he can do every run scheme. Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh are going to just love him. They want to be a run-heavy offense. Totally their type. The value's just fine. Hampton ended up my 19th player. Yeah, 19th player. You get him at 22. The value's just fine. Even a first-round running back. But I thought the Najee Harris free agent signing was really good. And you see who goes next in Matthew Golden and what he could have been in that Chargers offense. Knowing that they do need another pass catcher, I think as well, Will Johnson, reunite him. I guess there's serious concerns with the injury, but at 22, are we not taking a gamble on Will Johnson at that point? I mean, maybe they know more than I do. I'm sure they do, but this was a pick that I think is fine. It's a B pick for me. I'm not going to sit here and celebrate they hit a grand slam with this pick. Kind of smells of, okay, Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman beating to their own drum a little bit, which was fine. I want to hear from Chargers fans. What do you think about the running back pick at 22 after you signed Najee Harris? Because I think there were other directions I would have preferred to see them go. All right, the Green Bay Packers take Matthew Golden. This was probably my favorite draft moment ever. As a Packers fan, full disclosure, yeah, I'm a Packers fan. I don't care. This is a certified steal of a pick. This was before the draft. Matthew Golden, my 11th player in this draft. I think every single mock draft I did when Matthew Golden was there, I went on the NFL Stock Exchange show. He was there. I took him, broke it down why. Gutekunst actually agrees. Believe it or not, Brian Gutekunst. Copy and paste everything we said about John Schneider growing up in front of our eyes. Brian Gutekunst growing up in front of our eyes. They did it the first time since, 2002? They take a first-round wide receiver, and not just anyone, a really good one, that if they had him ranked anywhere close to where I did, the value was just too damn good to pass up. I did this whole spiel on the live stream, and I'm going to clip my reaction to it, so I'll kind of give you the Spark Notes version of everything I dove into with him. But I think when we all got initially exposed to Matthew Golden, when he kind of surprisingly declared after a late season emergence for Texas after transferring up from Houston, I think pretty much everybody that watched his film was like, yeah, I see the first round talent, really good route runner, wins tough catches, great after the catch, amazing acceleration for a guy, and a lot of kind of Stephon Diggs to his game where he plays bigger than his frame would indicate. And then he comes out and runs the 4.29, and the narrative shifted in a negative way. People saying, well, he doesn't play up to a 4.29, almost like that was some kind of red flag that he ran a 4.29. I agree. I don't think he plays up to 4.29 speed either, but I don't need him to. Neither does Stephon Diggs, which was the pro comp on him. You know what I'm saying? And if it's in there somewhere, great. If we can tap into that and get a great vertical threat, he could be one of the best wide receivers in the league. To me, this was one of the steals of the draft. And just like we did with Seattle, even better for Packers fans to know that your GM isn't so stubborn that he won't do this. And for years and years and years, they wouldn't. There would be some pretty glaring needs and great players available that they would just pass on for their guys. Like, I can't say enough about this pick. And for the Packers, like, they needed that true number one. And I know a lot of people have said, oh, Matthew Golden's a good player, but he's going to be a number two. I very much disagree with that. I think the acceleration he has, the ball skills, the route running, the run after catch, it's all in there. Yeah, it took him a little bit of time to break through after transferring up from Houston, splitting reps with guys like Isaiah Bond out the gate, but just watch the last 5-6 weeks of the year and tell me that's not a number one type of wide receiver. I think he's a really special talent, and Green Bay got one of the best values in this entire draft. And don't tell me I'm a biased Packers fan, because I have sat here and slammed the Packers. When they took Quay Walker, I called it the worst pick in the entire draft, and to this day, horrible, horrible draft pick. So don't tell me I won't be critical of these Green Bay Packers, because I am more so than anybody. But this is not the case. Huge tip of the cap to Brian Gutekunst, one of the best picks of the first night of the draft. Obviously an S, a certified steal grade there. All right, the Vikings go Donovan Jackson at pick 24. A little surprised they didn't trade down, especially because presumably the phones would be ringing. Atlanta and the Giants trade up with the next two picks. This one was like a B- for me. It's just early for me on Donovan Jackson, who I think is a high floor, lower ceiling guard in the league. I have play strength concerns on him. I don't think he really moves people in the run game. I think his anchor and pass protection is going to be tested at the NFL level. But he's technically sound. He's got quick feet. He's tough, competitive. There's nothing wrong with the player. It's just, in my opinion, they did what we try to advise these teams not to do, and that is reach on need in the first round. They have a gaping hole at left guard, kind of the one glaring weakness on that roster. And sure, maybe they had a first-round grade on Donovan Jackson. That's fine. I'm grading these picks off of my evaluations and how I saw it. I had Donovan Jackson as, good, solid second-round player, high-floor guard, and I don't think Vikings fans are going to complain about it, as you shouldn't. They want McCarthy to have everything in front of him and on the outside to thrive, and I do understand it. So I'm going B- here, even though it was one of the bigger reaches in accordance to my draft board. But I don't think they're going to horribly regret it. And he was, if you really were just focused on guard, he was going to be your best pick. But kind of reminiscent to me of when the Patriots took Cole Strange, where it's like, yeah, I kind of get it. Like, I'll defend it a little bit because the need was there. He was the next best guard by me. I think the Patriots took him with like the 30th pick, and I think I had him like 46th or something on the board. Like, that's pretty similar, but about 5 picks earlier with the Vikings. And, Cole Strange has had a lot of injuries. When he's been healthy, he's been okay, but, we'll see. We'll see. Talk about big reaches. The Giants feel the need to come up, get Jackson Dart, get that 5th-year option. I will applaud them for not taking Shedeur at number 3. I think with the risk that was going to be the case 2 months ago when they were super desperate, to get themselves out of that situation, huge thumbs up. And I agree that Jackson Dart makes sense for them. I think he's got a better arm than Shedeur. I think he's more athletic than Shedeur. The theoretical upside of him is even higher than Shedeur. I still don't think the upside is crazy high. But if the idea is who's the quarterback that we can sit for a year behind Russ, get great coaching from Brian Daboll, and hit the ground running in 2026, I understand that Dart was the guy they had circled for that. Just a couple things on that. And one of those reasons gets very clunky because of the situation Brian Daboll and the Giants have put themselves in. You know, it's reminiscent somewhat of when I was critical of the Falcons for taking Desmond Ridder because they were going to put themselves in a spot where they felt like they needed to give him a chance to play at some point, and he was going to be enough to stop them from drafting another quarterback because they felt like they had their guy. And in the Giants' case, ideally, I would be able to sit here and say, you don't need to take Dart now. Use your picks, build up the team, and wait for the opportunity to take a real first-round quarterback prospect that can be a legitimate high-end franchise quarterback for you. And the Giants just don't have that luxury because if they don't win games, someone else is going to be talking about picking that quarterback high. So this kind of ties you to the quarterback. It gives you almost job security in a sense because it's like, it makes things harder on ownership. It's like, man, are we really going to fire the coach that drafted Jackson Dart in the first round and hitch Dart to a new coach? In fact, we kind of need to give Daboll another year just to see what this whole Dart thing's about. So for Shane and Daboll, whose jobs are essentially tied at the hip, they put themselves in this situation. So playing the cards that you're dealt, like, again, I actually kind of agree that Jackson Dart as a sit and develop prospect actually makes more sense than Shedeur. I've talked about this. It's Cam Ward in a tier of his own, and then there's like 3 or 4 or 5 quarterbacks in this draft that were all tiered together. You can totally sell me on Jackson Dart as QB2 over Shedeur. I did have Shedeur QB2, but I totally understand having Dart as the guy, especially as your draft and develop piece. So it's a unique situation. Putting a grade on this is almost irrelevant. It's more of the context of how we got here, why they made this decision. Does it make sense? I see how we got here. I'm curious to see where this goes. At the end of the day, Dart, the player, I need to see him somehow improve his pocket presence. That to me caps his upside. I don't think he senses pressure well. He walks into pressure, throws the ball while getting hit when he doesn't need to. He bails out of clean pockets. That's where the Derek Carr comp came in. There was a lot of frustrations watching him play. Not to mention at times he just chucks the ball into double coverage willy-nilly. A lot of sloppiness that really rubs you the wrong way. So I'm not a huge Jackson Dart guy. I did have a second to a third round grade on him. So like, I get it. I get going for him here. Do I think this works out? I would bet against it, but I do still like Brian Daboll, and we'll see where it goes, I suppose. So I'm just going to give this like a C- because the whole thing is just a mess. I do think this is a reach, and I'm not crazy about it, but if he turned into like a kind of, you know, mid-range top 20 starter in the league with some frustrating aspects of his game, I wouldn't be that surprised because for the most part, it's just I do have a lot of faith in Brian Daboll as a coach. But then at 26, where the Falcons trade up, they get aggressive. They give a future first-round pick. There was a second, third-round pick swap in there as well. I think the Falcons gave, pick 46, and then they got the Rams, 103rd pick back. So definitely a busy trade there. Love it for the Rams to get a first-round pick in a better quarterback draft next year, a year further from Matthew Stafford, a year closer to Matthew Stafford's potential retirement. I think that's just a phenomenal way to play the cards. And then for the Falcons, I think this is a better player than Jalon Walker. I do. Very different, and both guys have incredible upside. It's just they're going to have to get there in different ways. For Jalon Walker, it's like he's got to learn how to play. At least play edge, but he's just like character through the roof, right? Whereas James Pierce, probably a top 10 player in this draft class that was available this late because of character concerns. There's a lot of smoke about practice behavior, interaction with teammates and coaches, just a lot of red flags popping up with him. But I kind of like the two-pronged approach from the Falcons. Like, man, we have spent 10 years trying to get this edge group right. Let's take a couple of guys with crazy upside. And if these guys both hit, bravo. Like, the upside for these guys is truly special. But, take a swing at a guy that the tape's great, but the character, maybe not so much. And another guy that's like, well, character's great, but he's going to have to develop. A couple of different approaches. It's kind of like the double dip strategy that I'm a huge fan of, where you can't always be so certain that the guy you took is going to hit, especially if you're the Falcons and you've lived this year after year after year. But the double dip strategy just literally doubles your chances of hitting on one of those guys. And then if both do hit, there's plenty of room for both these guys to be a cornerstone edge duo. So I don't even really hate it for Atlanta. It's just similar to what we said about the Jags. You better win. You better not be given the 10th pick in the draft next year to the Rams. Like, that's going to look really bad if you don't start winning some games. So I don't hate it. I'm going to give this a B because at the end of the day, I actually think James Pierce is a hell of a football player. I don't think he's a bad guy necessarily. I think getting to the league for a guy that's kind of been on the draft landscape could be really good for him to just kind of come in and be motivated and really get to work. So I do think it's a really good value. It's just, again, you can't just give it a certified steal when you're trading your first round pick next year to pick at 26. It's very, very aggressive. So I'm going to go B, but I wouldn't be surprised if it worked out. All right. The Baltimore Ravens at pick 27. This one's very easy to break down. I just mocked this in my mock draft a couple days ago. I love that the Ravens out the gate can get back to what they do best, and that is 3 safety defenses with Kyle Hamilton in that roaming bandit safety linebacker hybrid role with Starks over the top. Starks can do anything for you. You could even flip that and say Hamilton's going to play on the back end, and we want Starks to go man-to-man on a slot wide receiver, which isn't necessarily Hamilton's strong suit. But, you have Adarius Washington for now, 5'8", slower, undrafted safety that had a big year last year. We saw Geno Stone have a big year the year before that. They let him go. He didn't do anything in Cincinnati, so there's no guarantee that Washington's going to be able to sustain as a quality starter. I think there's plenty of room for Malachi Starks to come in and just be Malachi Starks, dude. Like, he is just a super sound safety. There's a lot of Antoine Winfield, Javon Holland. You can kind of put him everywhere. He's going to cover. He's going to hit. He's going to tackle. Crazy quick athlete. This, to me, is very reminiscent of when Kyle Hamilton was there for them and when Tyler Linderbaum fell to them. It's like, just play the board. If a great player falls to you, take him. And that's what the Ravens did. So I'm going to give this one an A. It's close to a certified steal. Starks was ultimately the 20th player on my board, but, I certainly wasn't surprised that he was there at 27, being the safety position. And I don't know that Starks has, like, all-pro upside. He very well might. But I look at him more as, like, a really, really high-floor player. He, to me, frankly, was more of the Brian Branch of this draft than Jahdae Barron. Like, go back to what we said about Denver getting a C+ on that pick. I would have much rather taken Malachi Starks and just started him as a slot corner right away and maybe be your long-term safety than going Barron. But anyway, let's move on to the Lions at pick 28. This one was just like, yep, that makes total sense. The Lions get Mykel Williams. Happy to see Tyleik go in the first round. He's a really good player, high-floor run defender, 2-gapping nose tackle. I think once Aleem McNeil gets back to full speed, he might not be ready right away coming off the injury. We'll see. But once he is, McNeil is great as a 3-tech. Tyleik can thump and play nose tackle. He gets to learn from DJ Reader, which, now that I say that, was Reader my high-end pro comp on Mykel Williams? Because that would be pretty crazy. No, I had him as a Grover Stewart comp. I actually had Kenneth Grant as the DJ Reader comp. But same idea where it's the perfect piece for that D-line. Reader's not going to be around forever. And even within this season, he's a guy that does have some concerns on how much you can play him. So it just makes a ton of sense. He's an absolute kneecap biting Detroit Lion type, and was certainly not a surprise. I had Tyleik a little bit lower with a top 50 grade, not a true first round grade, but we're really getting to the back end of the first at this point. And he was my highest graded interior defensive line prospect left at this point. The top 4 guys were already gone. So I'm going to go B+ on this pick for Detroit. I don't think it's a steal or exceptional value, but a really, really good pick for what they had to work with. Likewise with the Commanders, with Josh Connerly there. Now, this pick I am going to give an A because the value did line up for me. I did have a first to a second round grade on Connerly. I think he does have the potential to be a franchise left or right tackle for Washington. And to get that at 29 is really good business for them, especially considering he doesn't have to start right away. For him, it's just like, add some play strength, man. I think the technique's good, the athleticism's good, and you get to play behind Andrew Wiley at first, and maybe by season's end, he is starting. But if he can bulk up and improve that anchor, you have a cornerstone tackle duo. I really like addressing the offensive line because it would have been easy for Washington to get complacent after they added a bunch of kind of stopgap players last offseason, and they played really well, but it would have been really easy to get complacent there. They obviously go out and get Laramie Tunsil, but doubling down to get Josh Connerly. I mean, you could be sitting here, teams are like, man, we already had to contain rush against Jaden Daniels. Now, even if we want to get after him, we can't. That's a real problem for opposing offenses. And it felt like, Washington felt like they were at their best in those snaps where Jaden could just sit in the pocket and pick you apart. And you're going to get that at a much higher rate with these guys in there down the road, especially. So I went with an A pick, A grade there for Washington. Really like what they did. Then the Bills at pick 30, kind of doing what they do, making like okay picks that I feel like, maybe they could have gotten a little bit more. But we'll see. They take Maxwell Hairston. This is going to be a B grade for me. Hairston was not too far down the board there. He was 45th for me. So to take him at 30 is not that bad, especially in this draft class where corner it's like you're either gambling on an injury-prone player, which they would have had to do, it sounds like, on Will Johnson. I'm trying to avoid bringing his name up too much because it really does sound like the medicals on him are concerning. So I get that. But in this draft class, you basically had to take one early or take a guy with injury concerns. And the Bills really need another corner. So I think the player's fine. I think the scheme fits good. He played off zone at Kentucky. He's a playmaker, gives you some juice back there. I think he can be a good man-to-man corner as well, and gives them an athlete that they don't really have. If you're dealing with, Tyreek Hill running all over you or whoever it might be, a speedy wide receiver that you want to actually keep up with. If Hairston can prove that he can run man-to-man in the league, he's got potential to do that. So I don't want to just dunk on this pick. I think the upside is there. It just felt a little bit early, but I'm going to give this one a B, and he is a player that I'm excited to see get coached up from a secondary in Buffalo that does a really good job with it. But I know some Bills fans were pretty disappointed here, not going Will Johnson. And even a player in this range that I would raise the question on, and I get it, there's an ethical aspect to it. But if Mike Green goes in 2 picks to the Cleveland Browns and becomes a Pro Bowler, obviously we'll see what Hairston ends up. But I'm just spitballing here. It's a position they needed, was a difference-making pass rusher. But I do understand. There's baggage there, so I get it. I do. Don't want to just dismiss it. But at pick 31, the Philadelphia Eagles had their pick after they trade up with the Chiefs. They have their pick of Will Johnson or Jahdae Campbell. I thought for sure it was going to be Will Johnson. They go Jahdae Campbell. 2 guys, frankly, with injury concerns, and that's why these guys were there. I think Will Johnson was more of a long-term injury concern, whereas Jahdae Campbell, it's more like, where's he going to be in his recovery? That is why he was here, people. But at the end of the day, whenever Campbell gets on the field, he's an absolute freak. He was every bit a true first round linebacker prospect, which don't grow on trees. My pro comp on him was Zach Bond. Like, there you go. You got two of them. The blitzing, the range and coverage. Now, he's going to have to learn zone IQ. There are zone reps where he's still figuring out how to flow with traffic and take away passing windows. And in terms of getting through his run keys and taking on blocks, there's just with any 21-year-old linebacker, there is a lot to learn. But that's almost why it's like, if he's not starting for you in year one, it's not the end of the world. If he's recovering from an injury and learning and watching Zach Bond and listening to Fangio, like, whenever he does get on the field, he is going to be a real problem. And this was the third time where we saw a GM take a position that he would like infamously never do. And in Howie Roseman's case, he sees what Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean did together. Well, Nakobe Dean's durability has been a real problem for them as well. I don't know what they're counting on from him next year. But obviously Zach Bond, all pro season, transforms that defense, gets the big contract. He says, yeah, I could take two of those. I could probably live with that with the 31st pick. So that was really fun. I do think there's enough out there with the injury stuff that I will give this an A grade and not a certified steal, because it does sound like there's some risk involved. And if it is your shoulder and you kind of need a healthy shoulder to play linebacker because you're hitting people every play, if there's some durability concerns, something to keep an eye on there. But gonna go A for the Eagles. And then talk about durability / injury concerns. Josh Simmons to the Chiefs at 32. But in this case, I'm going to give this a S, certified steal. This was a pick I was joking about for like 3 weeks on Twitter and on this channel. We can't let the Chiefs get Josh Simmons, man. As a league, as a NFL fanhood, this is gonna suck, because I'll say it, Josh Simmons, before the injury, if he never got hurt, he'd be the 4th pick in the draft of the Patriots. He's the best offensive lineman in this draft. He's one of the best players in this draft. Flawless pass protection technique, elite hand usage, great athlete, run blocks, didn't allow a pressure before he got hurt in the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season. Truly a special talent, but has to come back from the patellar tendon injury. And not a lot of players have done that. So that's why he's here. But for the Chiefs, for the opportunity to get a player that I compare to David Bakhtiari with the 32nd pick, I think that's worth the risk. And you bring in more. You've got Juwan Taylor at right tackle. You don't need him to play right away. But for a team that's going to be picking in the bottom 4 picks seemingly every single year, the opportunity to take a guy like this that in any given draft would be a top 5 draft pick, the opportunity to take that and hope that the injury recovers is well worth the risk for me for Josh Simmons. So I'm going to give this an S, a certified steal. All right, guys, I'm going to rest up the voice for the live stream tomorrow. Definitely got to drink plenty of tea tomorrow. We've got a long weekend ahead of us. Do make sure you're subscribed and come back for those live streams. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Please do hit that like button if you did. It really does help. And that's all we got. I will see you soon. Peace out.